Thank you so much, Nicole. Jen, welcome. I'm super excited to get started with today's chat with you. As we jump off here, can we start by talking a little bit about, what about this topic today really speaks to you, and why were you so interested to speak to our community about this?
Well, I mean, first of all, Nicole gave me such a warm welcome. I just have to acknowledge that. So thank you for that. Love you too. So I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a DEI professional. I am a neurodivergent who has been in professional environments for about 25 years now, and most of that in digital marketing. I've been on the brand side, I've been on the agency side, I've worked for large technology companies, I've been in a startup environment. So I've kind of had a well-rounded experience. And as Nicole mentioned, I'm also co-founder of a nonprofit association for women in email marketing. So I have some experience speaking to diversity and especially gender issues as a leader in that organization. But today I'm primarily speaking to my own experiences and the experiences of those who are also neurodivergent in my network. I've been interviewing people in my network to find out how we're similar, how we're different, and how things are for us, just generally speaking, in the workplace.
Okay, so just to start off here, I know that we might have a large percentage of our audience that is aware of these terms, but can we start by talking, kind of defining what it means to be neurodivergent?
Yes. And actually, the language that I'm using hasn't really been standardized. So I'll tell you the terms that I'm using and what they mean, and they mean different things to other people. And also there's a lot of politics behind these terms, and we don't really have time to get into. There is a neurodiversity movement, and I'm not representative of that, and I'm not speaking to that, but I'm using the word neurodiversity to mean a diversity of minds. And that's a group of people who are all different. So your workplace is probably a neurodiverse workplace. You're not just really thinking about it that way. When I say neurodivergent, that is a person who has a neurodevelopmental disorder, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and there are some others as well. So neurodivergent does not mean mental illness, although there are some common comorbidities of people who are neurodivergent will often also have anxiety and depression. Sometimes they're bipolar. So I'm not going to be speaking to mental illness. I'll be focused on these brains that are just born a little bit different.
Thank you for touching on that. And you're right, there is a huge, within the movement to kind of recognize neurodiversity, there is a huge argument between people that really think that things like bipolar and personality disorders should be included in that. But you're right, there's a lot of kind of strife within that between people that think that they should and people that think they shouldn't. So thank you for making that clarification for what we'll be speaking on today. When we talk about kind of like how your workplace might be neurodivergent and you might not realize it. Most of the time when people think about these people that are in the workplace, what you're really seeing is somebody that's high functioning, right? Somebody that maybe only seems neurodivergent or seems not neurotypical, as we would talk about, people that don't have neurodivergencies. Are there any kind of critical ways that a high functioning person with a neurodivergent issue might kind of appear in the workplace? Are there anything that would really set them apart?
The phrase high functioning is a little bit loaded. I personally do use that phrase. Some people find it offensive. So I just want to clarify that. No offenses meant today. There's just not good language for the things that we're describing. And when I say a high functioning neurodivergent, you probably can't identify us. You have no idea. I mean, some people, it's a little more obvious, but there are so many people that go undiagnosed far into adulthood and maybe potentially are never diagnosed at all. They don't even know themselves. So how would you be able to pick them out? You're not going to be able to. We walk among you. And there are stats that say that somewhere between 17 to 20% of people are neurodivergent. So, and most people who have these disorders, they're living their lives, right? They're doing fine. There are people, for example, who are on the autism spectrum, who are literally disabled by this disorder and cannot, care for themselves, have a profession and live independently. But the vast majority of us can at some level. And there are plenty of us in these professional environments. And so you're not really going to pick up on who we are. You're going to pick up on, that person behaves a little bit differently than I expect. Maybe they're not that social. I don't feel really close to them. Or they don't really seem to have a filter. Like, why do they blurt these things out? Or why are they so disorganized and they never seem to meet deadlines, but I know they're really smart about this other thing. So those might be some cues, but it's not appropriate to ask the question because they might not even know themselves. And it's not the right thing to say.
Okay, so like you had kind of touched on in your answer there about the certain percentage of the population that is likely neurodiverse. When we think about kind of the diagnoses, and people can go far into adulthood without really ever being diagnosed. I know that a lot of the statistics talk about how half of the neurodivergent people are undiagnosed, and of those half, they're mostly women. And of that, many don't really understand why they maybe struggle to succeed or struggle to, proceed along a given career or life path in the same way that many other people do. So if someone has, a kind of, an intersection of all of these things where you might be neurodiverse and not really recognize it, how might this struggle manifest itself?
You may be getting feedback about your performance that is surprising to you. You might be told you're not a culture fit, either during the interview process or even after you've started at a company, which is a really flimsy excuse and is actually something that I heard a lot early in my career. I was always first runner up for jobs, and I'd ask for feedback, and that's culture fit is a way of saying we don't want diversity. Honestly, we want people who are like us. And this is uniquely a problem that's really affecting women because they're so much less likely to be diagnosed. They don't understand why they are not achieving, like, it's not as easy to do certain things. It appears easy for other people. The expectation that's put upon them is you should be able to do certain things. And especially as a woman, you're expected to have things like organizational skills. You're supposed to know how to color code charts, and not everyone can do that. There are some social expectations, right? And this is especially common in my observation in startup environments. Like, you're expected to socialize. That's a part of your job, and not everyone is going to be comfortable doing that. And something just like an extra stat to throw in there. Not only is this a big problem for women because girls are clever, you figure out workarounds and masking, and you don't ever actually admit to the problems that you're having. You just obsess about, why can't I do these simple things? But it's also an LGBTQ problem, autism in particular, because only, I think, about 30% of autistic people identify as heterosexual. So this is something that is not just a problem for everyone in the workplace, but even tougher for some of those marginalized groups.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I mean, a lot of what you're saying is hitting me super hard. I mean, so I'm ADD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in college. And even after that point, I never really understood, maybe like how this was going to really impact my career. I mean, Nicole gave my bio, and half the reason that I have so many jobs or so many kind of varied industries that I've been involved with is partially due to the fact that I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. I didn't really find my niche. It didn't feel like, this is great, this is where I belong, I want to be doing this the rest of my life. It felt like everything was a weird, kind of, I'm trying to squeeze myself into whatever shape they need me to fill, and it's not a natural fit. So thank you so much for calling that out, because it's something that I think is growing. We're seeing how increasingly common it is with a lot of women. I mean, it probably dovetails really nicely with the fact that, you know, women tend to be underdiagnosed when it comes to a lot of health problems, generally women-specific health problems. So it is one of those things that really people need to think of more, and needs to be more attention needs to be paid to it from like a healthcare provider aspect. All right, so when we talk about some of the, you know, some of the traits that might appear for neurodivergent people, there are a lot of misconceptions about these kinds of people, and we see them in the media. I mean, there's that show, The Good Doctor. There's a lot of different people that are portrayed in media as having a neurodivergency of some type, and societal attitudes kind of mimic that. But when we talk about these misconceptions, are there any of those that are strongly mirrored in the business world?
Yes, everyone thinks that autism means you're like Rain Man, right? And that you don't like socializing at all, which is not a blanket statement you can make about autistic people. Like, everyone needs human interaction, like everyone needs socializing. And you, like I said, you can't always pick us out of a crowd. You really cannot. And ADHD means that you are a hyperactive little boy. And that's a thing that magically goes away when you enter adulthood. And it's not. It's amazing that younger people have a higher likelihood today to be diagnosed and to get a lot of support and care in school, and have special IEPs and so forth. But then this moment you enter the workplace, that support is gone. And you're expected to conform to these neurotypical expectations. And it can be very frustrating, especially if you don't have any idea why you can't conform. So what you think you know, you probably don't know. You absolutely don't know, unless you are someone who is close to someone who's neurodivergent, or you yourself has a diagnosis. Then we're not easy to pick out of a crowd.
Yeah, for sure. One of the questions that we're getting in the chat, which I think is really interesting here, is how can we kind of approach this societal idea that medication is a cure-all, right? I think it's one of those things that's very interesting, especially when you think about the fact that not just because you are neurodivergent does not mean that you necessarily need to be or want to be on medication. So when you come from a society like America, for example, that's very like, well, take a pill for it. There's a pill for that. And you think that it's like a one-step cure-all. How can we really approach this, you know, as people that kind of have to live in this society, but want to try and kind of undermine that idea?
Medication is a very personal choice, and there's nothing wrong with medication. And I know that there's like a lot of disagreement about whether children, for example, should be on stimulants. If you have to make that choice for yourself or your family, you have to do your homework. You have to talk to your medical professionals. You have to do research, and there is no shame in medication. Medication does not solve every problem, though. It can complement an entire treatment plan. For ADHD in particular, there are coaches who can teach you tricks, brain tricks, how to get over the hurdles that are standing in your way. There are different apps that you can use. I use an app called FocusMate, and it creates, there's this concept called body doubling that ADHD people use.
Yes, I recently learned about this. This is amazing.
And you might be doing it and not even realize that there's a term for it, or it's a thing that's happening. And that's basically when you need to get something done. If you have a person with you while you do it, you can do it, but you can't necessarily do it by yourself. So this app gives you a 50-minute window with a partner, and you announce to one another, like, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z during our 50 minutes together. And then they tell you, well, here, I'm going to do A, B, and C. And you put each other on mute and you do your thing. And you feel this like profound obligation to do the thing that you just committed to. And then it's like, I'm not going to be distracted. I'm not going to, check my phone. Which just lit up, by the way, let me turn that over. I'm not going to do anything except what I just committed to this strange person that I have never met before. That's what I'm going to do. And then at the end, you tell each other, how did it go? Were you successful? Did you achieve it? And if you can say, yes, I did all the things that I said I was going to do, you get the dopamine hit and you're like, yeah, all right, let me sign up for another one of these.
It's wild how it really works. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, the person doesn't have to do anything with you. I mean, I've done it with, like, I'll have my friend on speakerphone and suddenly half the kitchen's clean. It's perfect. It's amazing.
Oh, I love cleaning the kitchen on the phone.
Yes.
It's the only time it gets cleaned.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a bunch of people. This is really resonating with a lot of people in the chat here. So let's kind of turn this back to the workforce a little bit. When we talk about, we've talked about things like medication or things like, the outward signs that somebody might display, but is there a way that, employers as well as, coworkers can support people in the workforce without having to, without asking things like, well, are you on medication? Well, what, is this because you're ADD? You know what I mean? It's one of those things where people want to be supportive, but if you can't ask the questions because it's not really any of your business, how can you be supportive for somebody who is neurodivergent? What does that inclusion really look like?
You definitely can never ask about anybody's medication. It's none of your damn business, right? And even if someone is medicated, that doesn't mean that all their problems are solved and they should be functioning like a neurotypical person. They are still neurodivergent and they still have challenges. So for me in particular, I cannot get an expense report done to save my life. And this has been a pattern at every single place I've worked at. And I'm sorry to all of my former employers. I know it drove you bonkers. I know that this is a very important thing that needs to get done. But telling me to just do it, right, that is not something that makes it possible for me to just do it. And I've got a friend who said, my company, that's the number one reason people get fired is not turning in an expense report on time. And that's not the right way to handle the problem either. Clearly, expense reports are very, very important. They have to get done. You've got legal and financial responsibilities. You've got to do this, right? So if threatening people's livelihoods is not the most empathetic way to get things done, how can we reshape this problem and think about a better solution? How can you work with someone who just is completely overwhelmed by the idea of figuring out what are all the stupid codes I have to enter into the system? I need a code for my department. I need a code for the project I'm working on. I need a code for my expense center. Like, first of all, that's crazy. Wrong word choice. That it makes it even more insurmountable and difficult to get started. And then when you finally do get through that and you get all the receipts in there, but you make a mistake and somebody in finance rejects it, but they don't tell you why, right? And you can't find the mistake and you keep resending it and they keep rejecting it and you keep sending it and they keep rejecting it. This is not an effective solution to getting expense reports done. So maybe a solution would be, all right, there is 1 hour out of every week that no meetings can be planned. And this is the expense report hour. And if you have an outstanding expense report, your attendance is mandatory. And it is a working meeting. And guess what? We're going to have all those codes that you need handy and available to you to make it easy for you. If you have a question about something, someone is available to you to answer that question in that moment while you're working on it. And you're going to submit it while we're all sitting here together, body doubling, and we're all doing the same thing and getting it done, right? What does that take? That means you have to have one person spend 4 hours a week dealing with this problem. And you're going to have a lot more expense reports getting done, right? And you're not threatening people's jobs, you're supporting them. So that is one way to create a more inclusive environment to get important things done, but also some flexibility. If my expense report is late, is it the biggest deal? If I'm kicking ass with my actual job responsibilities, but I'm failing to get the expense report done, maybe I should have access to some extra resources. Like, why can't I get administrative help? on something like that if it's really, really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I asked for administrative help once with an expense report, and I was told, you are not important enough, you are not senior enough, you are not worthy of help. Just get it done.
All right, so that really segues, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but that really segues really well into a lot of the questions that are coming up in the chat thread, actually. So when it comes to being neurodivergent and either job seeking or maybe coming back to the workplace after a break, how do you know if the business that you're applying to is a good fit and actually cares about your needs? And along those lines, like, how should you bring up this kind of neurodiversity in an interview or in the hiring process? Or is it one of those like, well, if you feel like it kind of things?
It's a personal decision. There's great risk involved in outing yourself. What's that going to mean? What if you out yourself during the interview process? Could you be rejected for the job based on that alone? I don't think that employers and managers are very well versed in this issue at all. I think that there is a huge risk to out yourself. I've been speaking to friends who, and I asked that question, do you out yourself? And I'd say half said yes and half said no. And the ones who said yes said they already felt very supported and successful where they were. So you can't, it's probably not a great idea during the interview process. And then it's a personal choice once you get in there. How do you know that you're going to be supported? You're rolling the dice, man. You just don't really know. What you can do is find out a lot about the company culture and what kind of initiatives have they taken on? Like, what are they doing with D&I? And how important is it to them? Can you look at their leadership on the About Us page, and can you see obvious diversity there? And if there's obvious diversity there, then maybe there is some level of support for neurodiversity in the workplace. But the truth is, it's almost not addressed at all. And that's why I wanted to talk today, to just say, it's a conversation it's time for us to start having and thinking about and figuring out, how does this complement the bigger picture when it comes to diversity in the workplace? Because when you have we've all heard, those of us who really are passionate about diversity in the workplace, we are completely sold on the idea that when you have different people with different backgrounds, then they're bringing different perspectives to the table and a higher level of problem solving that is ultimately going to make your company more successful. They're going to enjoy their jobs more. And people who are neurodivergent, yeah, okay, we can't get our expense reports done sometimes, but nearly all of us have gifts. There is a level of problem solving that neurodivergents who are professionals, high functioning, pretty much always have. A capacity to see the big picture, to think outside the box, to come up with connections that neurotypical people cannot see. People who are autistic can work with so much detail and precision and get things done in a way that definitely an ADHD person cannot. But we're bringing passion and excitement and creativity. And when you bring all of these super brains to the table, it complements that diversity story, and you have an even higher level of problem solving. So you want us in your workforce, and you should start thinking about these issues, because you should want to recruit us. Yes, we come with some baggage, but it's worth it, and we're fun to work with as well. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends is the answer to a lot of these questions. And I feel like this is also a point where we do have to recognize the fact that some people are more resourced than others. So you are able to, kind of be more critical of the companies that you're interviewing with, or the places that you're trying to assess. And sometimes you don't have the choice of like, well, I don't think they're going to be very supportive, but any port in a storm, you need a job, you have to take one. But one thing to flag is that, you are interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you. So Jen, like you had said, ask questions about, the kind of support that they provide to their employees. And you can even start it in broad terms of being like, okay, well, what kind of support do you have for employees that are facing a personal health crisis? What kind of support do you have for, new parents and that kind of thing? Because if it's a company that doesn't even really have like a parental leave policy, chances are you're probably not going to get a real great response. Now, personally, I tend to lead up front with the fact that, hey, I am ADD. I also deal with bipolar disorder, and I sort of let the chips fall where they may. Now, that's also coming from a person that I just don't have the patience to play the game. I don't have the patience to sit there and try and do the back and forth and see if these people are going to support me or not. But if they're not going to support you right off the bat, they're not going to support you once you've been an employee for 6, 8, 10, 12 months. So it's one of those things that you really do need to weigh and figure out on your end if you are okay making more of the compromises and trying to put forth suggestions for how you could be better supported, or you want somebody that's already open to those ideas.
10 years from now, this will be normalized, right? We won't be having these conversations.
I super hope so. I'm sorry we did run out of time today, but I do know that you are coming around for a chat and learn sometime in the near future. So if anybody's interested in hearing more from Jen, please check out our upcoming events and make sure that you don't miss this one.